The crystal flute slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Sparkling champagne splashed across her thrift store heels, glittering under the chandeliers like liquid gold, mocking her. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and standing at the center of it all, tuxedo crisp and ego louder than the orchestra, Ethan Vale smirked and whispered, just loud enough for the people nearest to hear. Guess not everyone here was born for crystal. The sting wasn't just from the broken glass. It was from the heat crawling up Lila's neck, the kind that burns when you're trying not to cry in public. Around her, the elite of Westford University's scholarship gala gleamed in tailored suits and sequin gowns, sipping champagne that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Lila's hands shook as she reached for a napkin, her voice caught somewhere between apology and shame. But Ethan just leaned closer, lips curved in a grin that could cut steel, and added, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm sure the janitorial staff will understand. You must feel right at home." For a split second, the string quartet's music filled the silence. Then came the soft hum of whispers, people pretending not to stare, eyes darting away but never really leaving her. Lila could practically hear their thoughts. Why is she even here? She bent to gather the glass shards, but a hand brushed hers away, gentle, trembling. It was Maya, her roommate and only friend in this glittering world of old money. Maya mouthed, "Don't," but Lila smiled faintly, swallowing the storm brewing in her chest, because this wasn't the first time someone like Ethan Vale tried to make her small. And deep down, she knew it wouldn't be the last. Before we go on, have you ever been in a room where you felt like you didn't belong? No matter how hard you worked to get there. Like every laugh and glance carried a hidden "you don't fit." Yeah, that's where Lila was standing. And if you're already feeling that mix of anger and pity bubbling up, good. You're supposed to. That's exactly how I felt when I first heard this story. Oh, and hey, before we dive in, if you believe no one should ever be humiliated for where they come from, you might want to hit that subscribe button now, because stories like this one, they're the kind that remind us why kindness should never be a luxury. The ballroom glittered like a dream she didn't belong in. Gold drapes cascaded from vaulted ceilings, the air perfumed with money, real money, the kind that didn't just buy things, but defined people. The Westford University Charity Gala wasn't supposed to be her kind of scene. It was where legacy students toasted to donations their parents would never miss, where professors smiled just a little wider for surnames engraved on library wings. Lila Hart, 21, scholarship student, communications major, part-time library assistant, and full-time fighter of imposter syndrome, stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching her borrowed dress like armor. The deep blue fabric shimmered under the lights, but the tag inside still read Goodwill. $9.99. She hadn't come here for glamour. She came because her academic advisor told her it was a great networking opportunity. Translation: smile. Impress someone wealthy, and maybe you'll get an internship instead of another rejection email. Across the room, Ethan Vale glided through conversations like he owned oxygen itself. And in a way, he did. His father funded the new research building. His last name carried weight that made professors nervous. And his Instagram bio literally said "born to lead." He was the kind of guy who never had to earn a room's attention. It arrived prepackaged. Ethan was handsome, sure, but not the good kind. The kind of handsome that looked rehearsed, expensive, and self-aware. He'd been Westford's golden boy since freshman year, captain of the debate team, heir to a luxury tech firm, and proud collector of admiration he never had to work for. Lila knew his type well. She'd served them coffee, handed them library passes, and watched them laugh about the charity cases who somehow slipped into Westford on scholarships. What she didn't expect was that Ethan would even notice her tonight, but he did, when she accidentally bumped the champagne tray against the edge of the table, sending that fateful flute tumbling. He saw his moment, and took it. And now, standing there surrounded by strangers with perfect smiles and invisible sneers, she felt like the punchline to a joke she didn't sign up for. Still, Lila wasn't built for pity. Her mom raised her on to shifts and a saying, "They can laugh at your shoes, baby, but they'll never laugh at your soul." She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and forced a smile. Guess I'm not used to champagne that costs more than my textbooks, she said lightly, hoping humor might diffuse it, but Ethan only smirked. Textbooks? Oh, right. You're the scholarship girl. Didn't realize they let you people into galas like this. The words hit harder than she expected. She felt Maya tense beside her, whispering, "Don't give him what he wants." But Lila didn't look away, because behind Ethan's arrogance, she caught something familiar. Fear. Fear that someone like her might not stay in the shadows forever. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, the humiliation, the whispers, the sting of being less than, wasn't the end of her story. It was the start of her power. Tell me this. If you were Lila, standing there in front of all those people, would you have spoken up or stayed silent? Be honest. What would you have done? Ethan's voice sliced through the music again, sharp enough to silence the laughter around them. So, Lila, he said, swirling his champagne like it was part of the performance, tell us, what's it like sitting in classes your parents could never afford to fund? Every head nearby turned. The string quartet faltered for half a beat before the music limped on, pretending nothing had happened, but everyone heard him. Everyone wanted to see what she'd do. Lila's throat tightened, the air heavy with embarrassment. She could feel her pulse pounding in her temples. I'm just grateful for the chance to learn, she managed, her voice calm, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Ethan chuckled, taking a slow sip. Of course you are. Gratitude is so charming. There it was again. The subtle cruelty wrapped in politeness, the kind rich kids used when they wanted to make you feel small but still look classy doing it. Around them, a few nervous laughs fluttered through the crowd, quickly dying when Ethan's gaze passed by. His friends stood behind him, smirking. Like a pack of wolves watching the weakest in the herd, Lila kept her composure. But her mind flashed back to nights studying under flickering fluorescent lights at the diner where she worked, saving every tip for tuition, the late-night phone calls with her mom, who'd always say, "Keep going, baby. They can take you light." That light burned now. Deep in her chest, she straightened her back, forcing herself to meet Ethan's eyes. "You're right," she said softly. "It is charming to appreciate what others take for granted." It wasn't loud, but it landed like a quiet punch. For a split second, Ethan's smile froze. The people nearby glanced between them, uncertain whether to laugh or nod. Lila took a slow breath, trying to shake off the humiliation still stinging her skin. She wanted to disappear, but another part of her, stronger, sharper, wanted him to remember this moment, because deep down, she was already planning how to make sure he would. She didn't know that Ethan had just started a game he was destined to lose. And the funny thing about people like Ethan Vale? They never see karma coming, especially when it's wearing a borrowed blue dress. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone look at you like you didn't belong, just because of what you had, or didn't have? How did you handle it? Would you have held your head high like Lila did, or would you have walked away? Then came the moment no one expected. Ethan was still smirking, raising his glass for another dig, when Lila's voice cut clean through the chatter. Calm, controlled, confident in a way that didn't need volume. "You know, Ethan," she said, smiling politely. "It's funny. People who talk the loudest about money usually don't have much else worth mentioning." The words dropped like pins on marble. The laughter that had been hovering on people's lips vanished. Even the violins seemed to hesitate mid-note. Ethan blinked. He wasn't used to being challenged. Definitely not by someone he thought was beneath him. "Excuse me," he asked, forcing a laugh that came out a little too tight. But Lila didn't back down. She tilted her head slightly, her tone light and almost curious. "I just mean, with all the privilege, you'd think you'd have more to say than what people can afford. It's a bit one note, don't you think?" You could feel the tension ripple through the room like static. Maya's hand gripped her arm under the table, whispering, "Oh my God, Lila." But Lila didn't stop. Ethan opened his mouth, but she beat him to it. "Actually," she said, glancing toward the podium where the dean stood watching, "since we're at a charity gala celebrating equal opportunity, maybe we should talk about what that really means. For example, how many of us here have actually earned our way through hard work instead of inheritance? Gasps, low murmurs. People started exchanging looks. A few of the older alumni in the crowd even nodded discreetly. Ethan's jaw tightened, the color rising to his cheeks. "You think you can lecture me on work ethic?" Lila smiled sweetly. "No lecture, just a reminder that dignity doesn't come with a price tag." And with that, she stepped away, composed, graceful, leaving him standing there clutching his champagne like a shield. It wasn't just her words that silenced the room, it was the way she carried herself afterward. Calm, measured, unbothered, the kind of composure that money can't buy and arrogance can't imitate. For the rest of the night, whispers followed her, not of mockery, but of respect. Even the dean found her later, quietly thanking her for speaking with grace in the face of cruelty. Ethan, on the other hand, stayed on the edge of the crowd, face set in a frozen smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But what no one in that glittering ballroom knew was that this wasn't just a lucky comeback for Lila. It was a calculated start, because Lila Hart had a plan, and a reason she'd kept her phone angled on the table all evening, quietly recording everything that had happened. Now I've got to ask you, would you have stopped at putting him in his place like that, or would you have done what Lila did next? What no one knew was that Lila hadn't just been enduring Ethan's insults that night, she'd been documenting them. Every smirk, every snide comment, every word dripping with entitlement had been quietly captured through the voice recorder app on her phone, sitting face down beside her plate. She'd learned the hard way that people like Ethan could spin any story in their favor, especially when the audience was wealthy enough to believe them. But this time, she wasn't going to let him twist the truth. And there was another reason she kept calm. Across the ballroom, at the head table, sat Dr. Amara Lynn, Westford's youngest, board member and one of the most respected entrepreneurs in the country. Lila had admired her from afar for years. She'd built her fortune from nothing, using sheer intelligence and grit. Dr. Lynn was known for her scholarship programs supporting first-generation students like Lila. Lila had noticed her watching the scene earlier, her sharp eyes missing nothing. And when their gazes met for half a second, Lila saw it. The smallest nod of acknowledgement, that was enough. The next morning, when Lila replayed the recording, the cruelty sounded even worse than it had in the moment. Ethan's condescension wasn't just mean. It was revealing. His comments about scholarship kids lowering the school's image, his brag about how his father basically owns half the university, and his dismissive laugh when someone mentioned diversity. All of it was there. Lila didn't blast it online right away. She waited. She edited out nothing, left the truth raw and unfiltered. Then she attached it to an anonymous email addressed to the university's PR office, the dean, and yes, Dr. Amara Lynn. She didn't include her name. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. For 2 days, nothing happened. She went to class, pretending everything was normal, ignoring the way Ethan's friends whispered and laughed when she passed. But by Friday morning, the campus had exploded. The recording had leaked. It was everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, even the university subreddit. Students were furious. Professors were disgusted. Within hours, Ethan Vale's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. The video's caption read, "Rich student mocks scholarship girl at charity gala. This is what entitlement sounds like." Ethan's face was unmistakable, so was his voice. When the university released its statement by afternoon, it was clear that someone important had pushed for action. Westford University upholds respect and equality above all else. We do not tolerate discrimination or class-based harassment. Sources close to the board said Dr. Lynn had personally requested an investigation. Ethan went silent. His friends distanced themselves. And that same night, his father's company scrubbed his social media accounts in a panic. Lila didn't gloat. She didn't even tell anyone it was her. She just sat in the quiet of her dorm room, watching justice unfold, hands shaking. Not from fear this time, but relief. And as her phone buzzed with an email notification from Dr. Amara Lynn's office, she exhaled for the first time in days. Subject: a private meeting. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Tell me this. If you were Lila, sitting there knowing your recording just blew up the entire social hierarchy of your school, would you confess you were behind it, or stay anonymous and watch from the shadows? Lila barely slept that night. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, messages, notifications, campus group chats on fire. Everyone had something to say about the recording. Some called her a hero, others a troublemaker. Most were just shocked that someone had finally taken on Ethan Vale, the untouchable golden boy of Westford. She scrolled through the comments in disbelief. People were dissecting every second of the clip, replaying his sneers and her calm replies. The top comment read, "That girl had more class in 5 words than he'll have in 5 lifetimes, but she wasn't celebrating. Not yet." The meeting with Dr. Lin sat in the back of her mind like a ticking clock. By morning, the campus was different. The air buzzed with curiosity. When Lila walked through the quad, heads turned. Some students smiled at her like she was part of a secret revolution. Others whispered, wary of being seen siding with her. She wasn't used to attention, especially the kind that came with both admiration and envy. At a.m. sharp, she arrived at the administrative building, palms clammy against her tote bag strap. A secretary led her into an office so pristine it looked like it had been carved out of sunlight and order. Dr. Amara Lin looked up from behind a glass desk, her expression unreadable. "Miss Hart," she said, standing to shake her hand. "I've been expecting you." Lila froze. "You? No, it was me." Dr. Lin smiled faintly. "Let's say I recognized your courage." She gestured for Lila to sit. "You didn't just record injustice. You handled it with dignity. That's rare." Lila swallowed, unsure what to say. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just didn't want him to get away with it." "Trouble," Dr. Lin said, leaning forward, "is what happens when truth makes people uncomfortable. You told the truth." For the first time, Lila let herself breathe. Dr. Lin continued, "Ethan Vale has been suspended pending a disciplinary hearing. His family isn't happy, but frankly, the board is done protecting arrogance. And as for you," she paused, a spark of something like pride in her eyes, "we'd like to offer you a position. My foundation needs a new communications assistant. Someone who understands not just public image, but integrity." Lila blinked. "You're serious?" Dr. Lin smiled. "Completely. You've proven yourself more capable than half the interns I've hired. Think of it as karma rewarding competence." It hit Lila then. The weight of everything that had happened, the humiliation, the whispers, the doubt, all of it had led here. As she left the office, the morning sunlight spilled across the campus, warm and steady. She caught her reflection in the glass doors. Still the same borrowed dress hanging in her closet, still the same girl from the diner and library. But now she stood taller. Later that afternoon, she got a message from Maya. "They're saying Ethan dropped out. Can you believe it?" Lila typed back, "Yeah, guess he finally learned something." Before she hit send, she hesitated and added one more line. "Funny how the world changes when people start listening." And just like that, the tables had turned. So, if you were in her shoes, sitting across from the woman who just changed your life, would you have taken that job offer right away, or hesitated out of fear it was too good to be true? Lila accepted the job, not with the wide-eyed excitement of someone chasing luck, but with the quiet steadiness of someone who'd earned every inch of her victory. 2 weeks later, she found herself standing in the gleaming lobby of the Lin Foundation headquarters downtown, a place that felt like the grown-up version of everything she'd ever dreamed of. The glass walls reflected a city that never stopped moving. And somewhere inside, so did she. She wasn't the scholarship girl anymore. She was Lila Hart, communications assistant to one of the most influential women in the country. And more than that, she had a mentor. Dr. Lin treated her not like an intern, but like an equal. She pushed her to speak up in meetings, to trust her instincts, to stop apologizing for existing in spaces others thought she didn't belong. Talent, she told her once, has no social class, only fear does. Ethan Vale, meanwhile, had become a campus ghost story. His expulsion had gone public after his father's company tried, and failed, to pressure the university into silence. The Vale's reputation took a hit, and for the first time, Ethan had to face what Lila had faced all along, doors closing that he couldn't buy open. Justice didn't roar, it whispered, but it was heard. Months passed. Lila's work at the foundation grew. She led campaigns for educational equity, told stories of first-generation students who defied the odds, and became the voice for those too afraid to speak. She wasn't just writing press releases anymore. She was rewriting the narrative. One evening, she was invited to speak at Westford's graduation ceremony. The same ballroom where she'd once stood humiliated under chandeliers now shimmered before her again. But this time, she was on stage, not in the crowd. She took the mic, her voice calm and sure. Last year, she began. I was here as a guest. I remember how small I felt standing under these lights, surrounded by people who thought I didn't belong. But what I've learned since then is that worth doesn't come from who you know or what you wear. It comes from what you do when you're tested. The room was silent. Every word landed like a heartbeat. She glanced toward the back, where she saw Dr. Lin watching, smiling faintly. The best revenge, Lila said, isn't anger or pride. It's success. The kind they never imagined you could have. Because when you rise above, you don't just prove them wrong. You prove yourself right. Applause filled the hall. Real, thunderous applause, and for the first time, Lila didn't feel like she was standing in their world. She felt like she'd built her own. She stepped off the stage to find Maya waiting. Eyes glossy. Told you, girl, Maya said. They can't take your light. Lila laughed softly. Guess not, as she walked out into the night. The air cool against her skin. She knew her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough, and refused to believe it. And if you believe that no one should ever be judged by their background, their clothes or their bank account, then stick around. Because stories like Lila's remind us, courage can come from anywhere. And kindness, real kindness, costs nothing but changes everything. A few months after that graduation speech, Lila's world had completely changed. Her name had started popping up in articles about next-generation leaders, and the Lin Foundation's social media campaigns were being studied in business courses across the country. Still, she never let herself drift too far from where it all began. She still visited her mom every weekend at the same little diner where she'd once waited tables. The regulars would tease her, "Don't forget us when you're famous." And she'd laugh, rolling her eyes, insisting she was still just Lila, but in quieter moments. She'd look at her reflection in the diner window and realize she wasn't the same anymore. Not in the way she carried herself, not in the way she saw the world. The girl who once lowered her gaze in humiliation now walked into boardrooms full of executives and made them listen. Dr. Lin liked to say she had steel in her smile. One afternoon, Lila got a message request on LinkedIn. The name stopped her cold. Ethan Vale, Curiosity 1. She opened it. Lila, I've been meaning to reach out for a while. I know I don't deserve your time, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I said that night, and for what I was back then. Losing everything forced me to see things differently. I hope you're doing well. And then Lila sat there, rereading it. For a long time, she didn't know how to feel. Anger? Pity? Closure? Maybe a mix of all three. Finally, she typed back a single line. We all learn our lessons differently. I hope yours stays with you. Then she closed her laptop and exhaled. That night, as she walked home under the glow of city lights, she thought about everything. The humiliation, the recording, the speech, the transformation. Every cruel word had become a stepping stone. Every scar, a source of strength. Sometimes, she realized, the universe doesn't give you revenge. It gives you growth. It doesn't hand you payback. It hands you purpose. And hers was just beginning. The next morning, she stood on a rooftop overlooking the skyline, prepping for a live stream fundraiser she was hosting for first-generation college students. Cameras rolled, lights glowed, but Lila's voice carried something deeper than performance. People ask me how I found confidence, she said, smiling at the lens. The truth is, I didn't find it. I built it. brick by brick. Out of every time someone told me I wasn't enough, she paused, eyes soft. And maybe that's what I want everyone watching to know. Your circumstances aren't your ceiling. They're just your starting line. As the live stream ended, her phone buzzed non-stop, donations pouring in, comments flooding with support. Dr. Lin walked over, clapping her lightly on the shoulder. You've turned pain into purpose. Lila, that's power. Lila smiled. It's not about power, she said quietly. It's about proving that we all belong somewhere. The city glowed behind her, alive, endless, full of stories waiting to be told. And somewhere out there, another scholarship kid was watching that video, maybe feeling small, maybe doubting their place, but for the first time, maybe believing that one day, they could stand tall too, because Lila Hart had shown them. You don't need privilege to make an impact. You just need persistence, if that hits home for you. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told you didn't belong, then you already know the truth. The best revenge isn't to fight back. It's to rise higher, and if you believe in that kind of story, well, you know what to do. Stick around. There are more where this came from. Stories where courage outshines cruelty, and where the people who were once overlooked become the ones everyone looks up to. Weeks turned into months, and the story of what had happened at that gala began to fade from campus gossip and social media trends. But what didn't fade, what couldn't, was the quiet ripple effect it left behind. Lila's name became something whispered in the halls of Westford whenever a student felt out of place or underestimated. Professors started inviting her back as a guest speaker for communication seminars. Talk to them about voice, they'd say, about courage. And every time she stood in front of those rooms filled with nervous students clutching notebooks, she'd smile and begin with the same line. I didn't plan to become a story. I just refused to let someone else write mine. One evening, after finishing another speech, she lingered in the empty lecture hall. The room smelled faintly of chalk and nostalgia. Maya joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You ever think about how it all started? Maya asked, handing her one. That one night, Lila laughed softly. Yeah, I think about it every time I see a champagne glass. They both laughed. The kind of laugh that comes only after surviving something that once made you cry. You know, Maya said, Dr. Lin was right about you. You turned everything they used to mock into a reason people listen. Lila looked out the window at the campus lights flickering below. I didn't do it alone, she said. I just decided the story wasn't going to end at humiliation. Silence stretched between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of peace. The next morning, Lila got a call from Dr. Lin. The foundation wanted her to lead a new initiative, a nationwide mentorship program connecting underprivileged students with successful alumni. It's time, Dr. Lin said simply. You've earned it. And this time, Lila didn't hesitate. She said yes. Months later, she stood on another stage, this time in a packed auditorium in New York, surrounded by cameras and young people who looked at her the way she once looked at Dr. Lin, with hope. She shared her story again, not as a tale of revenge or even redemption, but as a testament to possibility. When I was your age, she told them, I thought success belonged to people with the right last names, the right connections, the right everything. But now I know. Success belongs to the ones who don't give up, no matter how many times they're told they don't belong. The applause was thunderous, but what mattered most were the faces in that crowd, the quiet nods, the teary smiles, the young hands holding onto a little more belief than they had an hour ago. As she left the stage, her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged her in a post. It was a picture from the gala 2 years ago. Lila in her blue thrifted dress, standing tall while Ethan Vale looked away. The caption read, This was the night everything changed. Not just for her, for all of us. Lila stared at the photo for a moment, then closed her phone, smiling. She didn't need to repost it. The story spoke for itself now, because sometimes, the real victory isn't in proving people wrong. It's in proving to yourself that you never needed their approval to begin with. And if you've ever been told you don't belong, remember this. The view from the top hits differently when you've climbed every rung yourself. If stories like this make you believe in your own rise, even just a little, then don't scroll past. Stick around, because every week, we share reminders that courage isn't rare, and kindness isn't weakness. It's the quiet power that changes everything. By the end of that year, the mentorship program Lila launched had taken off in ways no one expected. What started as a handful of pilot schools became a national network. Hundreds of students, dozens of universities, and partnerships with companies that wanted to give back instead of just write checks. Lila's name was now tied to something bigger than one viral story. She'd built an ecosystem of opportunity, a bridge between the haves and the have-nots. The media called her the voice for the underdog, but she didn't see herself that way. She saw herself as a translator, someone who turned pain into purpose, one story at a time. Dr. Lin liked to remind her that success wasn't the real goal. Impact is, she'd say. The difference between the two is humility. So, when Lila received the invitation to return to Westford again, this time as a keynote speaker for their annual charity gala, she laughed. "You've got to be kidding me," she told Maya. "I'm not." Maya grinned. Full circle moment. You can't make this stuff up. Standing under those same chandeliers months later, Lila felt an almost cinematic sense of déjà vu. Everything looked the same, the glittering gowns, the music, the clinking glasses, but everything felt different. She wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. She was the spotlight. Her speech that night wasn't about humiliation or revenge. It was about growth, empathy, and accountability. "When you stand in a room that once made you feel small," she said, her voice echoing through the hall, "don't walk in with bitterness, walk in with grace. Because the real power isn't in making them regret underestimating you. It's in showing them who you've become despite it." The applause rose slowly, like a tide, then swelled into a standing ovation. Lila smiled, calm, confident, untouchable. After the event, as guests mingled, a young man approached her nervously. He wore a second-hand suit and the same uncertain look she'd once carried. "Miss Hart," he said quietly, "I'm a scholarship student. I just wanted to say, thank you, for showing me it's possible." Lila's heart softened. "What's your name?" "Daniel," he said, voice trembling slightly. "First year. Engineering major." "Well, Daniel," she said with a grin, "welcome to the family. You belong here. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." He smiled, the kind of smile that lights something up inside. And as he walked away, she realized that was her legacy. Not the speeches, not the recognition, but the spark she passed forward outside. The night air was cool and clear. The city skyline stretched endlessly before her. Alive with stories just waiting to unfold, she slipped her phone into her clutch, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Full circle." Because this wasn't the story of a girl who got even. It was the story of a woman who rose above. And if you followed her journey this far, you already know what comes next. It's your turn. Your turn to stand taller, to speak louder, to take every insult, every closed door, and build something stronger with it. Because people like Lila Hart don't just survive injustice. They redefine what power looks like. And if that truth stirs something in you, you know what to do. Stay here, subscribe, because your story, the one that starts with doubt and ends with purpose, might just be the next one we tell. Months later, Lila's life had settled into a quiet rhythm that somehow still felt extraordinary. Her mornings started with coffee and sunrise meetings overlooking the city. Her days filled with calls from schools eager to join her mentorship network. And her nights, those were the best, spent reading letters from students who said her story had changed the way they saw themselves. She'd become the kind of person younger Lila would have admired. Not for the success, not for the recognition, but for the peace. One night, she sat on her apartment balcony, legs tucked under a blanket, scrolling through her inbox. One message caught her eye. The sender's name, Ethan Vale's mother. Her stomach tightened for a second, but curiosity won again. She clicked, "Dear Lila, you don't know me personally, but I'm writing to thank you. Not for what happened to my son, but for what it taught him, and all of us. Ethan has been volunteering at a youth center in our town, helping students with college prep. He talks about your story often. Says you reminded him of what real strength looks like. I just wanted you to know, sometimes, the people who hurt us the most end up learning the biggest lessons from us. With respect, Claire Vale. Lila read the email twice, then let out a long, steady breath. She wasn't sure how to feel. Grateful? Relieved? But somewhere deep down, it felt like a chapter closing itself. She typed back a short reply. Thank you, Mrs. Vale, that means more than you know. I'm glad he found his way forward. And that was it. No bitterness. No lingering resentment. Just peace, because healing, she'd learned, doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes it's just a quiet understanding that the story has finally run its course. That weekend, she and Maya met at the same little diner they used to haunt in college. The waitress recognized them immediately. The famous ones are back, she joked, setting down 2 mugs of coffee. Lila laughed. Hardly famous, she said. Just lucky. Maya grinned. Nah, not lucky. You just refuse to stay small. They clinked their mugs together. A simple toast to how far they'd come. Later that night, as Lila walked home, she passed a street performer playing violin under a flickering lamppost. The melody was soft, hopeful, almost cinematic. She stopped to listen, smiling as the music drifted into the air. That's when she realized the story wasn't about revenge or humiliation. It was about becoming, about transformation. And as she dropped a few bills into the musician's case, she whispered, keep going. You never know who's listening, because she did know. Once upon a time, she'd been the one holding her breath, waiting for a sign that she mattered. Now, she was that sign for someone else. If you've ever felt like the world only notices you when you fall, remember Lila's story. It's proof that you can rise, rewrite, and rebuild, even when no one believes you can. And if that reminds you of your own fight, your own climb, your own quiet victories, don't just scroll by, follow along, because stories like this aren't about fairy tales. They're about real people who turn pain into purpose, and who knows, the next one we tell might just be yours, years later, long after the viral storm had faded and the foundation had grown into something legendary. Lila Hart still walked through life with the same grounded grace she'd learned the hard way. The Lynn Foundation now operated in 20 states, giving thousands of underprivileged students scholarships, mentorship, and hope. Her name was on the letterhead, but she never let that mean more than it should. She still took the subway sometimes, still visited her mom at the diner on Sundays, and still kept that blue thrift store dress tucked in her closet, a reminder of where it all started. One morning, she stood on a stage again, this time not at a gala, not at a university, but at a high school in her old neighborhood. The gym was packed with teenagers who looked at her like she was living proof that the impossible was possible. She took the mic, smiling warmly. I know how it feels, she began, to sit right where you are and think the world doesn't see you. To believe success belongs to other people, not kids from families like ours. But I'm here to tell you, it does see you. You just have to make it listen. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. People will try to define you by what you lack, she continued. Money, status, connections. But they can define what's inside you. Your drive, your grit, your kindness. That's yours. No one can buy that. And no one can take it away. After the applause, a young girl approached her, nervously clutching a notebook. Miss Hart, she said, I want to study communications too, but what if no one believes in me? Lila smiled and leaned down slightly. Then you believe in yourself twice as hard. That's how it starts. The girl nodded, eyes shining. When Lila left the stage that day, she paused by the exit and glanced back. The students were still buzzing, their laughter echoing off the gym walls. That sound, that energy, was everything she'd ever fought for. Later that night, back in her apartment, she found herself scrolling through old photos. One stopped her. The grainy shot from the gala years ago, the broken champagne glass, the look on her face right before she stood up for herself. She smiled softly and whispered, thank you, not to Ethan, not to the crowd, but to that younger version of herself who refused to stay silent. Because if she hadn't endured that moment of humiliation, she never would have discovered her voice, or the thousands of others who found theirs through her. Lila turned off her phone, stepped onto her balcony. and let the wind play with her hair. The city glowed below, endless and alive. Somewhere out there, another kid was sitting under flickering lights, dreaming of more. And maybe, just maybe, that dream would grow wings because of a story like hers. So, if you've stayed with me all this way, remember this: your past doesn't define you. It refines you. Every time someone underestimates you, that's your cue to rise higher than they ever imagined. And if you believe in stories where courage beats privilege, where grace outlasts cruelty, and where the underdog wins by staying kind, then you're in the right place. Don't just watch, don't just listen. Be the next one who proves that dignity, resilience, and heart are worth more than any fortune, because somewhere out there, your story is waiting for its moment to shine. Lila's story didn't end there. It evolved. 5 years later, the Lin Foundation had become a global movement. Their mentorship programs spanned continents, pairing students from small villages, inner cities, and rural towns with professionals who once shared their struggles. News outlets called it the new education revolution. Lila just called it the thing I wish I'd had. She'd grown into her role not just as a leader, but as a storyteller. The girl who once hid in the corner of a glittering gala now stood on world stages, her voice reaching millions. On one particularly surreal evening, she was invited to speak at a global leadership summit in Geneva, the same event where CEOs, politicians, and philanthropists gathered each year to talk about changing the world. When she stepped onto that stage, no teleprompter, no notes, just her truth. She took a deep breath and looked out over the crowd. I used to believe change came from people with power, she said. Now I know it comes from people with purpose. And sometimes, those people are the ones you least expect. The ones who've been overlooked, dismissed, or humiliated until they realize no one's coming to save them. So, they save themselves, and then they save others. The room was silent. Not the polite kind of silence, but the kind that comes when truth hits bone deep. After her talk, dozens of people lined up to meet her. Some wanted photos, some wanted advice, but one man lingered quietly in the back, waiting. When the line thinned, he stepped forward. A little older, a little humbler. Ethan Vale. Lila blinked, surprised but not shocked. Time had softened him. The arrogance was gone. Ethan, she said, voice calm, not cold. He nodded. I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to say, you were right. About everything. I've been working in education reform back home, trying to make amends. Lila studied him for a moment. Good, she said simply. Then make it count. He smiled faintly. I'm trying. For a long second, there was nothing but quiet understanding between them. Two people bound not by what happened, but by what they'd both learned from it. Take care of yourself, Ethan, she said finally. The world needs people who've changed for the right reasons. As he walked away, Lila felt no anger, no bitterness, just peace. Life had done what it was meant to do. It had taught. Humbled and balanced. Later that night, she stood by the window of her hotel, watching the lights of Geneva dance on the lake. She thought of her mom, of Dr. Lin, of Maya, of that first cracked champagne glass, and smiled. If life had taught her anything, it was this. The moments that break you are often the ones that build you the most. She picked up her journal and wrote one last note before bed. Power isn't in proving people wrong. It's in proving that kindness and courage always win in the end. And when she finally turned off the lights, her reflection in the window wasn't the girl from the gala anymore. It was the woman she'd become. Calm, fierce, and free. Because the truth is, no story ever really ends. It just becomes someone else's beginning. And maybe that's what this one is for you. If you've ever been told you're too small, too poor, too out of place to matter, remember Lila Hart. Remember how one night of humiliation became a lifetime of empowerment. And if you're ready to start your own story, don't wait for permission. Take your pain, your pride, your persistence, and write the next chapter yourself. If that message speaks to you, stay close, because every week, we share stories that remind you, grace is louder than hate, courage is stronger than fear, and people like you, you're the real revolution. Lila woke before dawn the next morning. The Geneva skyline still shadowed in gray. The hotel suite was silent except for the hum of the city far below. She moved to the window, coffee in hand, and watched the first sunlight cut across the lake. It always amazed her how quiet the world felt before it woke. How small even the biggest problems seemed when the day hadn't started yet. Her calendar was full: interviews, foundation meetings, travel to 3 countries in the next week. But for that 1 hour, she let herself just be. No titles, no expectations, just a girl who had once stood barefoot in her mother's kitchen, dreaming of being heard. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Lin. "Saw your talk last night. You've grown beyond anything I could have imagined. Keep your feet on the ground, Lila. The world needs more leaders who remember what the ground feels like." Lila smiled. She texted back, "Always, thank you for seeing me before I saw myself." Later that week, she flew home. The airport felt the same. The same smell of coffee and jet fuel. But when she stepped outside, the city somehow looked smaller. Or maybe she'd just outgrown its limits. She visited her mom at the diner, still running the same morning shift. When her mom saw her, she let out a laugh that cracked with pride. "There she is, my girl. The global superstar. Please," Lila said, grinning. "Still just your daughter who can't fry an egg right." Her mom wiped her hands on her apron and pulled her in for a hug. "You did good, baby. You did real good." That night, they sat on the porch, the air warm and easy. The stars glowed faintly through the city haze. "You ever miss it?" her mom asked. "Before all this?" "Sometimes," Lila admitted, "but I think the old me would be proud of who I became." Her mom nodded. "She'd better be." They both laughed. A week later, Lila stood in front of a camera crew filming a short documentary about the foundation. The director asked her, "If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?" She paused, thinking. "I'd tell her that the things that make you feel small now are the same things that will make you powerful later." She said that the world can only define you if you let it. When filming wrapped, she stayed behind watching the crew pack up. The camera lights dimmed, but in her chest, something brighter stayed lit. This was it, the real end of her story. Not because she'd reached some perfect place, but because she'd finally learned that she didn't need to prove anything anymore. She was enough. As she walked away from the set, her phone pinged with a notification, a message from a student she'd met years ago through her mentorship program. "Miss Hart, I got accepted into Westford. You told me not to give up, and you were right. Thank you for believing in me." Lila's eyes welled up. She smiled, typing back, "I didn't just believe in you. I saw myself in you. Go make the world listen." She locked her phone, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "Full circle," because in the end, that's what every story like hers becomes. A cycle of courage passed from one person to another, until the whole world starts to change. And if you've stayed with me through her journey, maybe that's your sign too. Your sign to stop waiting for permission, to turn the things that broke you into the things that build you. Because just like Lila Hart, you are more powerful than the limits the world tries to place on you. And if stories like this remind you of that truth, if they make you want to rise higher, speak louder, and live braver, then don't let this moment end here. Follow, share, and stay for more, because somewhere out there, another underdog is waiting to hear a story just like this one. And maybe yours is the one that'll light their way next. The following year brought one final chapter that no one, least of all Lila, saw coming. The Lin Foundation announced its most ambitious project yet, a global youth summit bringing together students from every corner of the world. The theme was simple but powerful. Voices that rise, and there was no question who would deliver the closing keynote. The day of the event, the stage was set in a massive open-air arena in Singapore. Thousands of young people filled the seats, waving flags, holding signs with messages like "Dream loud" and "We're the future." As the sun dipped behind the skyline, the lights dimmed, and Lila stepped up to the microphone. A hush fell over the crowd. She looked around at all those faces, different backgrounds, accents, dreams, and for a second, she thought about that first night years ago. The broken glass, the cruel laughter, the feeling of being small. Then she smiled. "I once thought power belonged to people who already had it," she began. But standing here tonight, I know better. Power doesn't come from money, or titles, or even luck. It comes from the moments when the world tells you no, and you decide to rise anyway. The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. I used to believe that humiliation could break you. She continued. Now I know. It can shape you. It can teach you who you are, what you'll stand for, and what you'll never let happen to someone else. A wave of applause swelled, rippling through the crowd, but she wasn't finished. Every single person here has a voice, and when we use them, not to tear each other down, but to lift each other up, that's when we change everything. That's when the world starts to listen. The arena erupted. Thousands of students stood, clapping, cheering, some even crying. The moment was electric, alive with the very thing she'd spent her life fighting for. Hope. As she stepped off stage, she caught sight of Dr. Lin in the audience, smiling proudly, tears in her eyes. Maya was there too, filming every second on her phone. You did it, Maya whispered, hugging her tight. You didn't just change your story, you changed theirs. Lila laughed softly. We did it, she said. All of us. That night, as the city lights flickered on and the after-party buzzed around her, Lila slipped outside for a moment of quiet. She leaned against the balcony rail. Looking out over the glowing skyline, she thought about her mom, probably asleep back home, about Ethan, somewhere in the world, maybe still trying to do better, about all the students who'd sent her letters, all the lives intertwined with hers now because of one awful night that turned into everything. And she realized something. All those years ago, she thought she'd been humiliated in front of the world, but really, she'd been introduced to it. The pain, the shame, the fear, they'd all been fuel. Every cruel word had become a brick in the foundation of the life she built. She smiled to herself, eyes glistening in the city glow. Full circle, she whispered one last time. Then she turned, walked back into the crowd, and disappeared into a sea of laughter and light. Because that's how every great story ends. Not with revenge, not even with triumph, but with peace. With someone who finally understands that their worth was never up for debate. So if you followed Lila's journey from that gala to this moment, take this as your reminder. What breaks you can also build you. What embarrasses you can empower you. What silences you can set your voice free. And if you believe that, if you've ever felt like the world tried to put you in your place, remember, your place is wherever you decide to rise. Stay with us. Subscribe for more stories that prove it's not luck or money that changes lives. It's courage, and who knows, the next story that inspires the world might just start with you.
Thank you for watching all the way through. If this story moved you, the next one will surprise you in ways you won't expect. Go ahead and click the video on your screen. Your next story awaits.